Olin, I'm sure you're exhausted from all the conversation we had on the postgame. My God, Olin didn't stop talking. Thankfully, we can pick it back up this morning. How are you?
I'm good. Yeah, that was a great post game. We should do that more often.
We were delayed by
abbreviated,
the,
right?
Abbreviated by the
yes.
Cubs game. That's right.
You don't abbreviate Olin on a day like yesterday, right?
No, he was.
Thank goodness we didn't have to talk about that for very long. What we watched yesterday, but it was a interesting game to watch the Chicago Bears because you came away really disappointed in the loss. Right? You thought if they ran the ball and won the takeaway battle, they would win the game pretty easily against a quarterback who's really struggling, right? Anthony Richardson, just rewatching some of the game, almost a comedy of errors he was making out there. And the Bears still found a way to lose to a quarterback who's really struggling and a team without their best defensive player. So just a disappointing day all around from the coach's decision, from the Bears not being able to run the ball, from some of Caleb's decisions, even though you can argue for a young quarterback, there was growth on that film when you watch it. But you come away thinking, man, that is one, if we're talking about this run against these bad teams, and maybe the Bears are a playoff team this year, that is one you do come away disappointed from watching.
Where was your confidence dented the most? We talked all morning so far about, well, you look at the general manager, you look at the head coach, you look at the play caller, you look at the quarterback, you look at the offensive line. At least the offensive line is not at the top of the list necessarily this week, Olin, but in what aspect was your faith challenged the most yesterday?
I think watching the game, some of the decisions from the sideline, they have to bother you if you're just watching the Chicago Bears play that game. Starting with, Santos attempting a field goal that maybe he doesn't have enough leg for, right? And you know that before the game, the special teams coach tells the head coach where he can make that from. And Pat Manley can speak to this better than I can. But just the fact that he came up short there on that first field goal attempt, didn't have enough leg, and then you give him good field position. And obviously, are we going for two? Are we going for one? It's just some of those decisions there you come away disappointed by because they going into the season that the offensive line is not strong, and then, Nate Davis is down, so you got Pryor in there. And your young quarterback is going to struggle sometimes. So I think for me, I come away from that game thinking that, Coach Eberflus, to win that game, he has to be a big advantage for us, right? He has to win on the defense side of the ball, and we got to make the right decisions from the sideline. It just kind of seemed that there was more confusion than there needed to be.
Dan Pompei told us in the pregame that the head coach had spent a lot of time with the offensive line, a lot of time in their meeting room during the week. And frankly, one of the great disappointments of the game for me was this idea that they did not have a power running game. They still were doing a lot of this kind of cutesy stuff. Even at one point when they lined up under center, they tried to do an end around with DJ Moore. I just didn't understand why it was all about trickery, especially when you're down at the goal line. Let's see if you can knock them back and you can get a yard. Let's try and see if you can do that. And I just felt very let down by the results of all that.
Yeah, I think that you go into that game and that the Colts have been challenged all week, right? To stop the run, the defensive line, get your pads low, get penetration, change the line of scrimmage. And you can see that the Colts came to that game with an aggressive mentality, but you need to expect that. You need to expect that as an offensive lineman. You need to know that they're going to get challenged the same way you would get challenged if you can't run the ball. They're working on the things that they have to stop the run. Gus Bradley is working on his defensive line, staying low, getting across the line of scrimmage. Even then, right, Mully, if you watch that game, you're going to give Roschon Johnson more than 8 carries, I think, right? After I watch him run the ball a few times down the field, a little too many times, he gets 8 yards. And then we're running some kind of boot, like you're talking about, motion, trying to get the ball outside, trying to run boot, trying to run around. If you just look at that, that series down there by the goal line, everyone's talking about with the option, right? Why are we in a 3 wide receiver set that whole time down there? Why don't we go big? Why don't we put big guys on the field with Mercedes Lewis? We should have a Carter versus Lewis down there. DeAndre Carter should be trying to hold our edge on the 1.5-yard line, right? That's a problem to me. You're three receivers too much, and I understand. You're trying to go substitution. You're trying to keep them in nickel. You don't want them to go big. Look, they went big. They a big guy on DeAndre Carter. You ended up wrong there. So, you go wildcat there. You motion your quarterback out. You run downhill. You get to the 1-yard line. You stay in 3 wide receivers, and then you end up trying to do an option. To me, that's just for an example of what you're saying, Mully, right? You go to Indianapolis, you go play the worst run defense in the league, and you say to yourself, I'm just going to go big, and I'm going to run the ball down their throat and not make mistakes, and we may come away with the win for this game. But I think they got to go back. Another thing I watch, and it's just kind of a pet peeve, but, Matt Pryor on the goal line, he's on a 3-point stance, right? He's in a 2-point the whole time. I know he's doing the silent count, but get in a 3-point stance, get your pads low, get your butt up a little higher, get your back flat, get your pad under the defensive lineman, and let's move guys back, right? Whatever plan you came up with, you have Coleman Shelton one-on-one with Grover Stewart, right? You got out coached down there. You just did. Like if I turn the film on, when I watch it with DeAndre Carter's on Tyquan Lewis, when Shelton's one-on-one with Grover Stewart, you just got out coached. DeForest Buckner is not in the game, guys. Right. Double team Grover Stewart. It seems simple to me.
You're exactly right. And you said it, out coached. You wonder how in the world the Bears came up with the plan to call 60 pass plays against the NFL's worst rushing defense out of 84 snaps. So, Olin, I ask you this. You mentioned Coleman Shelton. After the game, he publicly questioned the call and what they were going against in the 4th and goal option play. The players felt the chaos on the sidelines when Matt Eberflus needed to burn a timeout when he wasn't ready to go for 2, and he called for the extra point to be kicked rather than go for 2. At what point, after a loss like yesterday, do players start to question who's in charge and the decisions being made?
Well, they know who's in charge, right? And obviously, Coleman Shelton, I think I kind of heard what he said and then, try to backpedal after. And look, I saw the look. It wasn't the greatest looking option nor the greatest call, but you can do a better job, right? They have a trio block there. It's called a trio. It's the center, the right guard, the right tackle, working everybody up to the linebackers, right? Stay on your feet, right? Like if I'm a coach this morning and I hear Coleman Shelton say that to the media, I tell him, stay on your feet and make your block. Right? It doesn't mean you all have to be on the ground. They don't have the greatest look, but the look wasn't terrible. You can still try to make your blocks. Stay on your feet. You're all on the ground. Make your blocks and at least give the running back a one-on-one chance to score there. And this is why that bugs me a little bit, David. At that moment in that locker room, at that time, someone's got to take accountability, even though it may not be all your fault.
Right.
Right. There are times when you say, look, I got to make my block there. Like that's it. That's it. We all got to get better here. Other people like me will come on. I have nothing else to do. I'm an old retired center. I'll tell you how bad the play was. Right? Like I'll do it. Like you don't have to do it as a starting center for the Bears. Right? Everyone's moving in the right direction. There were things when you're watching it. Right? You're watching Caleb Williams hit Rome Odunze on the shot after one of Richardson's interception where you're just laughing at the TV like, oh, how did he throw that, right? He hits Rome Odunze on a shot. Then he throws the interception. But after the interception, you're wondering how a young quarterback would respond. Well, he responds pretty well, right? They go on a long drive. They get all the way down to the goal line, and then those plays come up. So as a team, at that moment in that locker room, you're not helping anybody by bringing up, oh, maybe the play wasn't the best play. Really disappointed that somebody would say something like that, or even kind of come off as saying something like, oh, man, I don't know about option on the 1-yard line. The play was installed. You should be ready to run it against any look, right? Any look. You are the starting center for Chicago Bears. You go out there, you say, look, all I got to worry about is making my way through the line of scrimmage and getting a block on that linebacker, and I need to do a better job of that.
So, Olin, we talked in the pregame about the fact that Vegas predicted 70% for winless teams, and sure enough, the Rams end up with a victory over the Niners, which is kind of a stunner because of how beaten up they are. But you don't forget they got a pretty good coach, and they got a pretty good quarterback. They come in here next. After that, it's Carolina. Carolina won with the red rifle, for God's sake. They had Andy Dalton starting, and he threw 3 touchdowns. I'm just wondering, when you look at the Bears heading to whatever it is, 4 consecutive games against teams that started 0-2, and you lose the first one, what happens now? What changes? I think the Bears are favored over the Rams by 2.5 points to open the betting line. I'm just curious, what happens now as you prepare for this week? What do you have to improve on? What do you start with?
Yeah, you better lock the hell in, right? You better
Yes.
lock the hell in and realize that these games are not guaranteed. And like you said, man, McVay and Stafford, always a formidable pair, right? And Andy Dalton replacing Bryce Young, it's the worst news you got as a Chicago Bears fan, right? So like all these games after the team we watch, now the defense at home, the Chicago Bears defense at home is going to be tough for anybody, right? So again, we talk about winning the games, having Caleb Williams grow a little bit. There were conversions on third downs. We talked about, they threw the ball too much. A lot of that he was checking to sometimes, right? So he has to improve on, game management. Okay, like I know it looks like a good pass looker here, but just run the ball downhill. So you got to focus. You got to get a little better. You got to stay together, right? We just talked a little bit about what was coming out of that locker room from Indianapolis there. Everyone kind of, jumping ship a little bit. Just get back together, get back to the building. A win, like you guys know in the NFL, they beat the Rams next week. We're on here telling them how great they were, right? Amazing, they won a game. You're 2-2. You're right back on track again. But like from what we watched yesterday, this offense has got to get going. They got to put points on the board. Caleb's got to protect the ball. We all know how you win and lose games in the NFL, right? We all know what really matters when you're playing the game, especially when these teams are so close and you're playing teams that you can beat or you can lose to. That's the thing about the Chicago Bears this year. They can lose to anybody, right? They're not going to beat the better teams, but they can compete against a lot of these teams. That's why we all thought they would be, if they made the playoffs, they would be like the last team in, right? That's what I thought. I thought if they did make the playoffs, they'd be the last team in because of how good their defense is. So the defense got to continue to play on the level they're playing at, and the offense has to continue. We talked about on the pregame show, getting a little better every week, getting a little better at the details, learning the offense. Shane Waldron, look, oh man, maybe I shouldn't have went 3 wide receivers down there for 4 downs by the goal line against a team who lost their all-pro defensive tackle.
This segment with Olin Kreutz is sponsored by Fireplace and Chimney Authority. Visit online or their Elmhurst and Lisle showrooms. All right, Olin, so tell me this. When you hear from Matt Eberflus after the game, I know he's just talking to the media, but he's talking to the fans. I know he's not talking the same thing to his team, or at least I hope not. When he says there were positives to be taken away, that there were good things that happened, how does a head coach after that disaster go up there and say that? What was your reaction to what he had to say, and do you think he's telling players something different?
I'm sure he is. You would hope so, right, David? I mean, when after a game like that, to be honest with you, I hardly listen to what anybody says after that game because I know 1 or 2 things are going to happen because the game was so ugly. Some people are going to bail a little bit, right? Like we heard. And people are just going to say things that don't even make sense to you after the game you just watched, right? And I think that's what you're watching now. Like you said, you want to see him come up there and say, man, at this point, we just got to get better, right? We got to win games like that. We all know there are positives on every film, right? The film, we say in the NFL, it's never as bad as you think it is, and it's never as good as you think it is, right? And the Chicago Bears, I watched the first 3 quarters again this morning. There is truth in that, right? There is truth that there is positives on that film. But when you don't realize you got to go for 2, right? When you make the mistakes that we saw made on the sideline yesterday, some of those things you got to leave for, like you're saying, what is he saying to his players? Some of the things you got to leave for the players, right? Like you go in the room and you say, Caleb, this is when he had his meeting with, I don't know, how many positions does he meet with now? Linebackers, quarterbacks, offensive line. If I'm Coach Morgan, I'm like, Coach Flus, man, appreciate it, but you don't know anything about opening your foot, getting your pad under somebody, straining through their chest, and getting your hands inside and regrouping, right? I have to do my job. If you need to sit in here with me, just get rid of me, right? If you need to sit in my room and help me coach my offensive line, you can just send me on my way. because I don't need that right now. I don't need. I'm a professional offensive line coach, right? I'm supposed to be one of the best in the world. I'm supposed to be the best 32 offensive line coaches in the world. If you feel like you have to watch over me, just you can go ahead and if you feel like you have to announce it, if you have to announce that you have been in the offensive line room, you can go in and move on from me. So they got a lot to work on in that building. A loss like that stinks. A lot of people are not going to be happy, and you hope so. You hope there's a lot of people in a bad mood up there at Hallis Hall this week, and to get this stuff moving in the right direction, because like you guys talked about, they did lose this game. A lot of things were bad. That was an ugly loss. About an ugly loss as I can remember doing as long as I've been an analyst of watching a football game. It was a comedy of errors to watch. It was an ugly loss, but you got to get back. You got to get back going, because like we talked about, you have beatable teams with the defense you put on the field.
This segment with Olin Kreutz is sponsored by Busey Bank, building business, growing wealth since 1868. Olin, we'll let you go. Just curious, did we learn their offensive identity? We were wondering what they were. Do we now know they're kind of a finesse passing team?
Yeah, I know what their identity is. It's a team with a rookie quarterback who they're trying to find. They lost, one of their best wide receivers in Keenan Allen. They lost one of their best weapons. That wide receiver group, as you can see with Roma Dunze yesterday, DJ Moore making plays, DeAndre Carter out there. That wide receiver group, as we thought coming into the season, is the strength of their team, right? Their offense is the identity on their offense. You can line people up. You got to cover someone one-on-one, and we'll beat you there. Now, they're missing Keenan Allen, the original plan. They're missing that guy right now. That's why they go 3 wide receivers there down on the goal line. Like you're saying, to their offensive coordinator, that is their identity. He thinks if he puts wide receivers on the field, he'll scare the team into thinking that they'll throw the ball, and somebody won't leave a DN one-on-one with DeAndre Carter, and he has to hold the edge there. So, like you're talking about, they got to make a little adjustments. We talked about it in the pregame. What is their plan without Blossingame, right? What is their plan without their fullback? Well, you saw it. They put Everett there in the backfield, and he's not a fullback, right? He played fullback yesterday, and he is not a fullback. So, yes, here's the thing about guys. When we were a great running team, the years we were, 2005, 2006, 2001, the years we could really run the ball and I played. The wide receivers were tough as hell, man. Moose Muhammad, right? Desmond Clark, Jonathan Gilmore, tight end. It takes more than the offensive line to just say, I'm going to line up, I'm going to pound the ball down your throat. It takes 11 guys who believe in the run game. It takes 11 guys in the NFL. If you watch some of that film yesterday, you see safeties making tackles. You see guys that the receivers and the tight ends are responsible for stopping the run game, even when the O-line is getting movement. So sometimes you build your skill players up and you forget, they are a part of the run game too. If we want to be a power run team, they have to be a part of our culture, our identity. And I just don't think that they're built that way right now. I don't know if they can get it moving in that direction, because they built a team that's supposed to scare you by spreading you out and getting the ball in their skill positions' hands.
Great stuff, Olin. Thank you, buddy.
Thanks, Olin.
Thank you, guys.